Hello, welcome to Undercover. My name is Dave Pauli. I'm director of the Missoula Public Library and the host of this show, which looks between the covers of books by Missoula area authors. This show is jointly produced by the Missoula Public Library and Fact and Fiction Bookstore. And tonight our guest is making an encore appearance. Mike McCoy has been on this show before, and we're glad to have you back. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks, Dave.
Your newest book is called Montana Off the Beaten Path, A Guide to Unique Places. This is, I guess, a very specialized kind of travel book, all about the state of Montana and some places that maybe a lot of us don't know much about. I wanted to ask you, first of all, what the genesis of this book was. How did it come about?
The Globe Pequot Press, which is the publisher of the book, has a series of books in the Off the Beaten Path series. I just happened to be fanning through their catalog, a year and a half ago or so, and ran across the section on this series. They have maybe, at that point, they had maybe 20 of the states covered. And so I contacted them and to inquire whether or not they were interested in a Montana version, and they were, and we progressed and led to a contract and led to the book.
Are they planning to do a book about every state then?
I think eventually they are, yeah. I know also this spring a book on Washington State and a couple others came out. So I think they probably have 30 or 35 of them covered now.
Great. You, in the intro, you graphically described Montana's size. I mean, I guess for those of us who haven't lived here a long time, it's still pretty amazing how huge this state is. You said that you could fit Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Delaware, Rhode Island, New York, and Pennsylvania into Montana and still have room to spare. And then you went on to say that people might be wondering about the phrase off the beaten path in Montana, because one might think that everywhere is off the beaten path in a state this big. But what's the answer to that question?
Well, I think, I suppose to a lot of people, city dwellers, anywhere in Montana is relatively off the beaten path. But I don't know, I think towns like Missoula and Bozeman and the larger towns have a lot of the same sorts of places as cities anywhere, the burger stands and the motels and so on. It's you don't have to venture far off the main highways in Montana, as anybody who lives here knows, to find to encounter backwaters and back roads and unique places. But that's my theory.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you give us some example of some particular place that you've talked about in the book that is an off the beaten path spot of interest?
Sure. One that stands out in my mind is a place called Oscar's Dreamland, which is about 5 miles outside of Billings. This Oscar Cook, I believe, Oscar O. Cook, he's about 95 years old now, has been collecting machinery, farm machinery, and all kinds of drills and drilling rigs and combines, threshers, all kinds of things, old cars, old hearses, horse-drawn, steam-powered, gas-driven. I think he's been collecting them for about 30 years now and saving everything. He has several acres, I think about 12 acres covered with machinery and a little old west town and all kinds of unusual things. And he has 3 sheds, each of them about the size of a football field. Wow. Just jam-packed with this equipment, from airplanes. There's just about anything you can name. The drilling rig that was used in the movie Far and Away was lent by Oscar to Ron Howard, who produced the movie. For instance, that's the kind of thing he has. It's a very unusual attraction. There's a sign, I recall, as you're approaching Oscar's Dreamland, that says many things you will not see anywhere else, and to me it's a super piece of understatement, because there's a lot there you've never seen.
And you tried to document in each of these instances if there's a charge and when it's open, and,
right,
and a phone number,
right,
so people could contact ahead of time. But how did you find all these places? I mean, was it just serendipitous, or you obviously had set out to do some research? But I'm kind of interested in how that all worked.
I've already traveled a lot in Montana through the years. In the late 70s, for instance, I was a contract archaeologist and worked throughout the state and became acquainted with most of the corners of the state. And so I kind of had a start there, and then I'd visited a lot of the places already, and to find out about new places, I contacted chambers of commerce and friends I have in different parts of the state, and so on, and found out about things in that way.
It must have taken you a while to do all this.
Yeah, it took more than a year, more than that. And some of the places I didn't revisit. I've been to. There's a couple places I haven't been, but almost every place in that book I've been, and some of them haven't been to for years. But so I didn't revisit the ones I'd been to. A lot of them up in the northeast corner of the state, which is so far from here. But
yeah. Well, that's still a lot of miles put on.
Yeah, it is. It was.
Is it possible? It must be possible that you didn't cover every point of interest that you might have liked to. How did you decide what to leave out?
It was, in some cases, it was really tough because there's so much more I would have liked to put in it, but I was working with a pretty stipulated length range for this book. So I just had to leave some places out that I would have loved to put in, and hope that people will discover those on their own. There are a lot of the places I'm thinking of are nearby, some of them in the book. So I think people, if they wander around and find some of these places, inevitably they'll run across some of these other places that had to be left out.
Could there be a sequel to this?
That's a good question. I haven't seen a volume 2 of any states, so I might have to, I imagine as time goes on, some of the places in this book will go out of business or whatever, and I might have to replace them with some of the others.
Maybe.
Yeah. The publisher tends to keep these books in print for a long time. For instance, I think the main edition, I think, is in its 5th edition, and it's been in print since the early 80s, so they keep them going.
Mm-hmm. And how did they decide that you were the person with the right credentials to do this book?
Well, I just convinced them that I was through the letter that I wrote and telling them my background and how I've traveled a lot in Montana already, and the other books that I had written.
Great. I guess as I was reading this, it brought up the whole issue to me of the tourism industry. Now, this is a book that I assume is going to be marketed to people who want to see Montana, not just native Montanans, or people that live here, but people from outside the state are going to find this book in bookstores around the country or in their library. First of all, I wonder if you feel comfortable commenting on the whole idea of how important tourism is to Montana. And my second part of that question is, isn't it kind of a soft industry in that it's not a real reliable source of revenue for a state?
I suppose the second part, I'm not real comfortable commenting on the second part of the question, I guess, but the first part of the question, I think tourism is important, but what I've heard is that even with tourism really growing fast in Montana like it is, most of the people are tending to go to Glacier and Yellowstone and the better known places, and a lot of the small towns are not really benefiting that much from the boost in tourism. And so I'm hoping that through pointing out some of the places in the smaller towns, the lesser known destinations, that this book will help that to some extent. I don't know if you noticed, Matthew Cohn, the director of Montana Travel, has a little blurb on the back. He liked the concept and he thought that was going to work, so he agreed to give it a little positive statement on the back.
So did you try to stay away from the more well-known attractions in this book?
Yeah, I did. I mentioned a place or two in Glacier, for instance, but places where the average tourist doesn't find or doesn't get to. And other than that, there are places that pretty much everybody in Montana has heard of, but a lot of the people from outside of the state wouldn't have heard of. And then there are places in the book too that a lot of Montanans have never heard of, I'm sure, because I had never heard of several of these places.
Well, in one of your chapters, which this really intrigued me because I just finished reading a book by Dayton Duncan where he went around to some of the least populous counties in the country, and one of them was in Montana. He went to Jordan. I think that's Garfield County.
Yes, I believe that's right.
And he talked about what life was like in these places. And you were talking about this proposal that's surfaced in the last few years from some, I think it's Rutgers professors, about abandoning the tradition, the ranching and farming in the Great Plains, and making it into a sort of a unique wildlife tourism park, just because evidently they feel like this whole idea of trying to make a living there isn't working very well for a lot of people. And there was a really strong reaction to that. I just wondered what you thought about that, first of all, that whole proposal.
Yeah, I think there were, although they're related, I think have been two different proposals. There was one by the Institute of the Rockies, I believe, that wanted to change, they call it the Big Open proposal, wanted to kind of change it into Montana's answer to the Serengeti in Africa. Then the people you're talking about at Rutgers, I believe, the Poppers, their proposal is called the Buffalo Commons, essentially the same thing. I have really mixed feelings about it. The idea of a large, it would just be fantastic country to have reverted to the Old West with buffalo roaming around and so on. It just looks like it should be like that. Yet you have to feel for the people that live there too, and it's a little bit presumptuous of people to come in and tell them how they think they should be making a living. I think if they can convince the people there that that's the thing to do, that would be one thing. But just I think they have a lot of convincing to do, because the people that live there don't seem to think it's as bad as outsiders looking at them think it is.
And I guess the second part of that question is, well, how you felt about it, but also there was a reaction, a pretty strong reaction from people who lived in places like Jordan and had lived there for several generations or had a ranch or whatever. And you even described one of the reactions in there. They said, well, here's what we should do with Missoula then. Would you comment on what
Yeah, I think that their counter proposal was that since it was initially a group of Western Montanans that came up with this theory, their counter proposal, some citizens of Garfield County in that area, was to dam the Clark Fork downstream from Missoula and refill the basin that prehistoric Lake Missoula once occupied, and thereby ridding Montana of its worst pollution and congestion problem, that is Missoula. And at the same time, it would create a lot of new recreation jobs for the state. But it's the same as they're saying the Buffalo Commons proposal would for the eastern part of the state.
Right. Well, I'm not sure how serious people take those kinds of proposals, but do you think that would have any kind of viability as a tourist attraction?
Oh, I do. I think it really would.
Isn't there actually, to an extent, that huge open area is already functioning in that way, partially?
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of people. I didn't realize again until I visited the largest, for instance, the largest prairie or plains elk herd left in the country is down along the Missouri River on the Charles M. Russell Wildlife Refuge, which surrounds Fort Peck Lake, and it very much is a wildlife refuge. There aren't too many, if any, buffalo down there, but there are a lot of other animals. So.
Well, what about if someone were to use this book as a guide to go to some places in Montana, and say they're an out-of-state tourist, are they looking at the kind of amenities they could find in other states as far as motels and restaurants and that sort of thing? Yeah,
I think so. There are, Montana has a wide range of dining and sleeping facilities, and some of the nicer bed and breakfasts in Montana, I think, compare favorably to just about anything you can find in the country. The New England and California wine country, for instance, are known for their bed and breakfast, but we have some to match. I got a call. One of my favorites is the Sovacommer in Great Falls, and just 2 nights ago, I got a call from one of the owners of the Sovacommer saying that, thanking me for putting her in the book, and she'd just gotten a call from a woman in Tennessee who had found, like you were saying earlier, found the book in her local bookstore and called up and made a reservation based on seeing it there. So it's.
Well, I guess we don't traditionally think of the Montana experience as a bed and breakfast.
No, we don't. And you can have the dude ranch, anything from a rustic bunkhouse experience at a dude ranch to as fine a bed and breakfast as you can find anywhere.
So this book kind of runs the gamut from different sorts of experiences.
That was my goal, was to try to feature a little bit of everything, just to show how diverse Montana truly is.
You said, this is the question I've been waiting to ask, and I'm intrigued about what your answer is going to be, because you said in the introduction that some of your very favorite places were sort of a secret, and you weren't going to reveal them to anybody, even though you tried to be diverse in here. But I just wonder, is there a chance you might reveal even just one of them, since this is a purely local audience that's going to be watching this show, or is that still something you'd rather not do?
Well, I better not do that. I better stick to my word there.
Okay. I presume you probably have friends that wouldn't be happy with you if you
That's
didn't.
right. That's right.
Okay.
I more or less took an oath of honor. So.
Okay. I might ask you again someday.
Yeah, off camera.
I've been trying to wheedle out, since I'm a newcomer relatively here,
Yeah.
from other people, where the best places to go. But this sure is a great guide for that. Well, I was going to ask you about the publisher, which is Globe Pequot Press in Connecticut. Now, I guess you already kind of answered that, how they got interested in a book like this. But
Yeah.
they're putting together an entire series of states.
That's right.
And what about marketing this kind of a book? What do they do to get this around to other parts of the country?
They have a magazine and newspaper list that they send promotional material to and advance copies to the people that they decide are right. And they have distributors or regional booksellers that travel around to the bookstores in the various parts of the country, and they go to the National Booksellers Conventions and so on. Then their catalog goes to a lot of people, including most of the bookstores, I think, in the country and other book distributors.
What about you? Are you involved in that in any way besides this kind of stuff?
I'm really not. I could probably become more involved in it if I wanted to and if I had more time, but I haven't as of yet. I might on down the line.
And also something I wanted to ask you is, a book like this takes a lot of time and energy and effort. Do you personally realize a return for what you put into it? I mean, financial return.
Yeah,
for what you put into it?
that's yet to be seen. You get the way it works. You get an advance on your royalties to hopefully give you enough money to be able to do the research and pay you for your time of writing. And then if the book sells well down the line, you'll get out of the red on your royalty account and start getting in the black and then getting royalty payments. And so if this book sells as well as others in the series have, I think I think down the line that I will be rewarded financially.
So this is a pretty successful series.
It is.
What about any, I know you've written about, when you were here a while ago, we talked about your books on mountain biking in Montana and in the West. And are any other projects on your burner right now?
Well, as a matter of fact, the same publisher, they were pleased with the job I did with this book, and they are kicking off a new series called Discover Historic America. It's going to have 4 volumes: Colonial America, Mississippi Heartland, Dixie, and the Wild West. And they've signed me on to do the Wild West book. And so that's a big project. It's going to be nearly a 400-page book, and I'm doing that in my spare time now. Starting that in my spare time, it'll be published sometime probably late in 1994.
That really isn't that far off. So
It really isn't. Yeah, when you start looking at the calendar.
when we say the Wild West, how are we defining that?
It's a travel guide to attractions that are evocative of the Old West, of the days of westward expansion. And attractions meaning anything from Old West towns like Dodge City, Kansas, to reenactments like Custer's Last Stand at in southeast Montana, to dude ranches and rodeos, things like that. And it will also incorporate sidebars with little historic stories to go along with it, to tell about the attractions, or that somehow correspond to what I'm talking about in the other pages of the book.
But there's another major research
It is.
project for you, isn't it?
You got to see the mail that I have coming to my house from the States. I already have 2 file drawers full of information from the state historical societies and the travel bureaus and so on. So it's going to be it's kind of mind-boggling right now, but I think I'll start getting her nailed down soon.
Is there anything you left out because you didn't feel it was a very interesting, you don't have to tell me what, but I mean just in general, a very worthwhile place to see?
After visiting?
And
Yeah. There are a few like that, I'd say, that I had to, again, balance and say, what am I going to put in here, and had to decide to leave some out because I felt that others were more interesting. Another of my favorites, there are a lot of favorites in there, but this one just popped into my mind, is the American Computer Museum in Bozeman.
Yes, I remember
which,
reading about it. I had no idea.
Yeah,
that was.
I was telling somebody about it the other day from Bozeman. They didn't even know it was there. But it's quite interesting. It's just a small room, but it leads visitors through the history of computing from the abacus discovered or invented by the Babylonians, I think in about 500 BC, through the days of the slide rule and the punch card machine, up through the computer that put man on the moon, up to the present day PCs. So,
I'm definitely going to see that
yeah,
next time I'm in Bozeman.
It's well worth a visit.
I went there to see the wonderful Museum of the Rockies, of course,
yeah,
but I didn't realize there was that is pretty unique. Well, we have a few minutes. I wonder if you might just, I know in your other life, besides a writer of these books, that you work for Bike Centennial, if you could just explain briefly what that is and what's it doing here in Missoula.
Sure. Bike Centennial is America's largest recreational cycling organization. We have about 35,000 members. To give you an idea of the national and international, to an extent, scope of the organization, fewer than 1% of our members live in Montana. It just happens that the couple or the two couples that began the organization were living in Missoula and going to school here, that it's in Missoula. That's why it's here and why it's still here. Most organizations like ours are in the Washington, D.C. area, most national nonprofit organizations. But maybe we started a trend because the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation's here now and the Boone and Crockett Club recently moved here, so that's kind of neat. But we serve primarily recreational cyclists, mountain bikers, bicycle tourists, fitness riders, as opposed to racers. And we publish a magazine for our members. We operate tours, bicycle tours throughout the country, including cross-country trips. You may remember the organization began back in 1976 as a sort of a cycling birthday party in celebration of the country's 200th birthday. And that summer, the inventors of the organization, so to speak, developed the Trans-America Bicycle Trail, which goes from Astoria, Oregon to Williamsburg, Virginia. That summer, nearly, I think almost 5,000 people rode the trail. And Bike Centennial was started as an event that was supposed to be over after that summer, but there was so much interest that kind of took on a life of its own and just kept going, and here we are, 17 years later.
Great. Well, I'm sure glad you're in Missoula. Our guest has been Mike McCoy, and the name of the book is Montana Off the Beaten Path, A Guide to Unique Places, and some of these are really unique. I wish we had time to do some more description of them, but pretty fascinating look at this huge and interesting state. Thanks a lot for being our guest, Mike.
Sure. Thank you, Dave.
Now we have a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit about happenings at the Missoula Public Library. I don't know if anyone can see, but I'm wearing this little button that says Missoula Public Library, Library of the Year 1993, and I occasionally will get asked, well, what does that mean, Library of the Year for the whole country? Actually, no. We're working on that one for next year, but it's an award given to one library each year in Montana. So we are the Montana Library of the Year. It's given by the State Library Association. And I've also been asked, how do you get that award? Well, you have to be nominated, and you have to have letters of nomination from as many individuals around the state as you can get. And we were lucky enough to have some real kind people who wrote nice letters about us and nominated us, and we got the award. So we're real proud to be the Montana Library of the Year. That explains a little about that. I also want to mention the regular programs that happen year-round at the library. First one is called Book Babies, which we do every first Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. This is a program for parents and their babies or toddlers 2 years old and younger. So the parents have to bring the kids. We do a very brief program of songs or finger plays or a book for the babies, and then we have a speaker for the parents, talks about nutrition or how to find good child care, those kinds of things. That's every first Wednesday of the month at 7 o'clock. You can call us at 721-BOOK if you want more information about that. Another regular program, this one for adults, is our book discussion group that we do every third Thursday at 7 o'clock. We've been having a pretty interesting year because trying to decide what to discuss, and we've done a variety of things, everything from Uncle Tom's Cabin to very contemporary novels. We have a pretty faithful group, but we're looking for additions, so if anybody's interested in being part of a book discussion, I think it really helps you to hear what other people have to say about the same book that you read, and you get some insights that you didn't think about. You can call us again at 721-2665 if you want to know more about book discussion. That happens every third Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock. As for other things that are happening at the library, you're going to need to check with us to get more information about our regular preschool story times, because we do have times of the year when we're not doing as many, or we're in the summer we're doing them on different days, but we will be starting up a regular morning, afternoon, and evening preschool story time. So you can call us to get information about that. We've had an extremely successful year as I speak right now. Our year ended, our fiscal year and our statistical year ends June 30th, and so we had an extremely successful year. We checked out well over 500,000 items, which is an all-time record for us. It beats last year's all-time record, and so we're continuing to grow, and I want to make special thanks to everybody in Missoula who's been real supportive of the library. We continue to have plenty of needs and need lots of help and support, but I'm just real happy with the way things are going and the success we've had in reaching a lot of people in Missoula. I think it's interesting to note that we are the busiest library in the state of Montana. We check out more items than anyone else, including Billings, which serves a slightly larger population than we do. So it's a commentary, I think, on the level of interest in reading in this city and county, and we're real proud of that. Also, while we have just a little bit more time, I want to mention the fact that maybe some people don't know, but we do have two library branches. One is in Seeley Lake, and we are a cooperative effort with the school library there. Part of our collection is up there for the public to use right in the high school library in Seeley Lake, and we have a branch also up the Swan Valley in Condon, which is open a couple days a week. You can call us if you need any information about the branches and when they're open, or any of the programs that we're doing at the library. And I might also mention that we have a couple of copies at least of Montana Off the Beaten Path and Mike McCoy's other books about biking. So you might want to come down and check out a couple of those. Thanks again for being with us, Mike. Appreciate it.